Hello everyone, this is County Historian Larry Tippin. We have been doing a series on the early history of Putnam County, and in this presentation we'd like to talk about the founding of Putnam County and some of the interesting early facts of the county. Let's start talking about the people that are here before us. We have a lot of physical evidence of the natives that were here before we came, particularly in the Portland Mills area along Raccoon Creek. You can go to the presentation we did on Portland Mills and you can read and see some of that information. Let's start talking about this. I know you can't read it, but this is the Treaty of 1809. We're gonna look at it closer, but I wanted to show you this is the whole treaty, called the Treaty of Fort Wayne. This is one of the main treaties that had the effect on Putnam County and the creation of really this part of Indiana. Some of the early treaties were the Treaty of Greenville, Ohio, 1795, and Grassland in 1805. Talk a little bit about this treaty. It says James Madison, President of the United States. This is courtesy of State Archives, by the way. By William Henry Harrison, Governor of the Territory of Indiana, Commander-in-Chief of the forces, along with the Miami and Eel River tribes, and as our allies, Delaware and the Potawatomi tribes, have agreed to cede some land to the United States government, basically. It says a line drawn from the mouth of Raccoon Creek where it empties into the Wabash, and then going down to where it hits the Treaty of, the line for the Treaty of Grassland. I'll show on the map where all those treaty lines were. Now, the natives, they didn't really think that someone could own land. They thought that was kind of a ridiculous idea. They said, quoted Professor Little Turtle several times, saying that you can no more own the land than you can the wind. So what they're doing is they're agreeing to leave the lands and not contest the European settlers' claims to the land. And also, as part of this, they're going to receive an annuity, an annual payment, which they're going to go to Fort Wayne to receive in, I believe, May of each year. And they're going to get some things that they like. Obviously, cash money has no value to them. But they're going to get, I don't know, coffee, tobacco, sugar, and so forth, through the course of annuity. And that's their payment or their incentive, so to speak, to leave these lands. This is the signature page from that. Anytime as I'm going through this presentation, you can pause. You have a pause button, or if I get ahead of you, you can, there's a little dot, either red or blue, depending on what platform you're using. You can grab and pull back to go to a previous slide. You may want to pause and read some of these. These are the signatures from the various tribe leaders from the treaty. You can see the Delaware, the Beaver, and some of the others. The Potawatomi, particularly Chief Winnemac, significant. Eel River Charlie. And then for the Miamis, the Connie, very hard name to pronounce, the Owl. The Loon, sometimes called the White Loon, but most significantly, the Little Turtle. Little Turtle was the main leader of the Miami tribes. The Miamis had a lot of the land in Indiana, so they had the main Miami tribe and some sub-tribes of the Miamis in different regions. And then you had different other Indian groups that were part of what was called the Greater Miami Nation. So that the main influence in what became Putnam County was the Miami Indians, although the Weha Tribe was not far away near Newport along the Wabash River. But the Little Turtle was the one that led the Indian tribes in battle in the early 1790s, and most noted for St. Clair's defeat. St. Clair was the leader of the federal troops, and apparently not a very effective leader. So the Little Turtle and his coalition that he put together defeated St. Clair several times. And then in 1795, St. Clair was replaced by Mad Anthony Wayne. You probably heard of him. He was a much more effective leader. And in 1795, Little Turtle had put together a coalition that was said to be over 1,000 warriors from various tribes, Miamis and others, at the Battle of Fallen Timbers in Ohio, where they were defeated. And that led to the Treaty of Greenville in 1795, where they gave up quite a bit of land in Ohio and a little bit in Indiana. We're going to look at the map in a little bit. Conspicuous in the absence was the Weha Tribe. One of the conditions of this treaty was the Weha had to consent, even though they didn't sign off on it. And one of the leaders of the Miami tribes, Tecumseh, did in fact get the Weha to agree. And also conspicuous in the absence is the Shawnee, led by Tecumseh. Tecumseh did not agree to any of this. He didn't think it was right or proper that they would give up land to the United States government, any tribe. And also, he didn't think that the other tribes had authority to give up his land. It actually went to Vincennes, or post-Vincennes, what it was then, and tried to convince William Henry Harrison that all these treaties are null and void. And Harrison had the idea that no, you're really not here in this land. It's not yours. The Miamis and the others are the ones that had authority to cede it. And we're going to do it anyway, basically. It was done legal, it was done proper, and it became a heated exchange. It's 1810 at Vincennes. Apparently some knives, maybe even swords were pulled. But calmer heads prevailed, and the situation was diffused. So that Tecumseh and his tribe of the Shawnee left, but they didn't get over it, and they continued to be hostile. Came to a head in 1811 in north of Lafayette, Battle of Tippecanoe. Well, it's an interesting Battle of Tippecanoe. At least the Loon, sometimes called the White Loon, and Winnemac, the leader of the Potawatomi, had several of their warriors, I don't know how many each, that participated in the Battle of Tippecanoe, even though they had signed this peace treaty. It wasn't a peace treaty per se, they're giving the land up, but they're not really sitting around smoking a peace pipe or anything. So if you'd like to finish reading, you could pause, or you can go to state archives, or some of the tribal sources have some of these treaties, so they're very interesting to read. Going to move on. This is a book that was published in 1919 called Early Indiana Trails and Surveys by George Wilson, talking about the 10 o'clock line. When they had this treaty of Fort Wayne, the interpreters explained to Little Turtle and some of the others that the boundary line would be where the sun would cast its shadow at 10 o'clock in the morning during the month of September, very specifically during the month of September, because that's the month that it was signed, because the shadow, say, in the spring would be completely different. The shadow during the month of September. And then this George Wilson's talking about 10 o'clock I run by John McDonald, but he did not say when. And then he mentions these two men. And then in 1819, several surveys. We're going to look at a map and show you a little bit better interpretation of that. And that the United States government had acquired almost 3 million acres in this. Also, he said the tradition that the Indians were very troublesome when land was being surveyed. I'm not sure exactly that's the right term. I'm not so sure they were troublesome per se. Little Turtle had said that the white man could manipulate the compass or other instruments, but not the sun. So he wanted to see the shadow cast at 10 o'clock in the morning during the month of September as it was being surveyed. And also, as some have suggested, he stuck his spear in the ground and watched the shadow. I don't really think that's the case from what I can see. It looks like he was just observing the instruments of the surveyors and the shadow they cast, and partly he wanted to make sure they did it right. And also, he wanted to know where the line actually was going to be, so they would know. Okay, so if you want to pause and read more, you can, or you can get this publication. I'll move on. In that same publication, there's this map of the state of Indiana. It shows the various treaty lines. There's quite a few of them. But I highlighted the Treaty of Greenville is orange, starts at Fort Recovery up in Ohio, east of Fort Wayne, goes down the Ohio River. The Treaty of Grouseland line, and then a 10 o'clock line. Those three lines collectively made up the northern boundary of Indiana when it became a state in 1816. So that was, Indiana was just this little bit right here in 1816. It got quite a bit more land in 1818. I'm going to talk about this treaty, and I'm going to go back a little bit, talk about what led up to some of this. This is the Treaty of St. Mary's, Ohio, in October of 1818. It's actually 6 different treaties. There's quite a bit of trouble getting this done. There's 2 treaties by the Wyandot, and then 1 each by the Miami, the Weha, Potawatomi, and Delaware tribes. And the reason it wasn't signed on the same day was these tribes were not necessarily getting along with each other. And they didn't want some of these tribes at the same place at the same time. So the Wyandot signed, and they left before the Delaware came in, for instance, because they didn't want any problem, because there's a lot of uneasiness with the tribes. It was not all, I don't know, peaches and cream, whatever we want to call it. Everything was not just happy and everything. So some of these tribes were actually not getting along. They were not happy with some of these treaties. Sometimes they felt they had no choice. But, you know, the Weha did sign this, but not the Eel River, and certainly not the Shawnee. And this is very, very poor quality. I mean, this is an image of the actual treaty. So it's very nice to see these. Unfortunately, it's not legible, but I've got a transcript of it, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the people that signed, some of the conditions. Let's go back a little bit then to the uneasiness that occurred. And when he talked about Little Turtle, he's, like I said, the main leader of the Indian tribes, signed the Treaty of Grenville and led the delegation, Treaty of Grouseland, 1805. And it was Little Turtle that was able to keep the tribes, so to speak, in line, if you will, and to honor the treaties, even though the white men are not honoring the treaties. He told them that we need to show them how it is done, and maybe we can lead, and they can see by our example what it's like to honor the treaties. Quite a few of the young warriors especially did not want to honor the treaties, and they wanted to cause trouble. It was Little Turtle that pretty much kept the coalition of the Miami tribes and the others from causing any trouble or whatever. And they honored the treaties. But then he died in 1812. And Tecumseh, I'm pronouncing this wrong, and I know I am, but that's the most common pronunciation of it, succeeded him. Now, Tecumseh leaned more toward Tecumseh. He was not really a big fan of these treaties, and he was really mostly in line, or kept in line, by Little Turtle. So it's getting to where it's not looking very good now after Little Turtle died. And Tecumseh had created a coalition called the Pan-Indian. Some of the tribes around this part of the country, and also north and in Canada. And they were fighting with the British against the United States in the War of 1812. Now it looks like the whole thing's going to fall apart because he didn't participate in the battles, but he was starting to lean more toward Tecumseh's way of thinking. And then Tecumseh was killed in battle in 1813 in Canada. You can read about all that if you'd like to. It's pretty easy to find. And then his Pan-Indian coalition fell apart, basically. So, and then the War of 1812 ended. Ended really more of a stalemate than anything else. The British made their point. They burned the nation's capital. Dolly Madison saved the famous painting of George Washington. That was about the most significant thing that happened. But it ended up pretty much the way it started. And then some of the tribes basically had to stand down, so to speak, and particularly because Tecumseh is now no longer living. Epicani then, he died in 1816, succeeded by his nephew, Richardville. Richardville was an interesting character. He was a half-breed. I apologize if that's not the proper term. But his mother was a Miami Indian, but his father was maybe a French fur trader. And we have some evidence that the French fur traders even here in Putnam County, were interacting with the Indians, sometimes interacting enough that they ended up with children. And that's what happened with Richardville. And then he was the main Miami chief that signed the Treaty of St. Mary's and led that delegation, if you will. And as an incentive for him to sign this, the treaty gave him and some other leaders and some of his children, which were specifically named, he had 16 children, I believe, who were specifically named in the treaty, and that was also noted as being half-breed. And they gave granted, like through a land patent, Richardville and other leaders and children specific title to land. So they're giving them some land. And also they reserve large tracts for the Miami. I'll show you in a map here what it is. And the Weha, that's southwest of Lafayette, what's now we call Fort Owen-Tanon, if I'm pronouncing that right. There's an interesting map. Basically shows just where some of the treaties were. The lines are not really exactly where they were during the treaties. So don't know really if the boundaries were pushed a little bit over time. Again, there was a lot of uneasiness in the tribes, and I think they pushed the boundaries a few times. But this Treaty of Wabash was the part that was reserved for the Miami tribe in the Treaty of St. Mary's in 1818. Basically, it was a wilderness at that time, not developed, not really anything. But this is where they were allowed to go, and this is what reserved. By reserve meaning is the United States is not going to sell any of that land to settlers, and they could have free use of that land in that area. And you see that Treaty of Wabash 1840, which is kind of interesting. In 1830, President Jackson basically wanted all of the natives to leave Indiana and really the Midwest in what was called the Indian Removal Act, sent them to Oklahoma and some to Kansas, including some of these, although some of them were allowed to stay until 1840 when we needed the land, and then we sent the ones, the tribal leaders or whatever, to Oklahoma at that time. Although, since some of them were already half-breed and some, even after that, were already starting to intermarry, many of them stayed, and they're still there today. So you could, many people in this part of the state can trace their heritage back to the Miamis and other tribes. And then is one of the reasons they were allowed to stay and they didn't have to be removed in the 1830 Indian Removal Act was because they did not take sides, or they were neutral during the War of 1812, although some of the individual warriors and some of the sub-tribes, so to speak, were actively against, battling against United States forces, but mostly because of Little Turtle. The tribe itself was neutral. That's why they were allowed to stay. That was kind of interesting. Look at this map. This is State Archives. And it shows where the 10 o'clock line was. And it's interesting. It says this Henry and Harris, and they date October 1st, 1812. It was not noted in that previous publication looked at when the 10 o'clock treaty was lined. He said it was run. He said it was by John MacDonald. I'm not so sure now. We're going to look at some things that clarify some of that. And this date is interesting, October 1st, 1812. That actually would make sense. It was supposed to be run during the month of September because that's the shadow during the month of September. So it had to be done in September. So I would have thought it would have been before 1812, but if it was dated October 1st, 1812, it was probably run during September of 1812, and probably by these two and not John MacDonald. But we'll show you how he was involved with that in just a few minutes. And that date's important because Little Turtle died July of 1812. So if it was run in September, Little Turtle's gone. It would have been Chicani or Richardville, or maybe one of the other leaders that were observing the surveyor's instruments. And then just for fun, on that same map, I drew in what is Putnam County. Very poor drawing, but serves its purpose. And show you when the different townships of Putnam County were surveyed in July and September of 1819 by Milroy Wright, John Collette. That's kind of interesting. And it was at State Archives. I noted that they had surveyor's notes, which were incredibly valuable. And I'm going to show you some of the surveyor's notes from the surveys that were run. They started out with a map. I know you can't read it. This is a map of Russell Township, what's now Russell Township, a true 36-section township like they're supposed to be, although they're not all of them are. And then the signature, zoom in, the survey by John Collette, 1819, kind of neat. And then it's followed by about 30 pages of field notes. Incredibly, incredibly interesting to read. I know you can't read this one, but I'm going to zoom in on one later that you can. And they note the geography and geology of the area, what kind of waterways there were, the trees, the species of trees, and other unique characteristics of the land. And also, it was said that when they surveyed and they drew the line, they did it physically with a chain and rod. So they had to chop down the trees that were in the line. So it was said that for years after the line was run, you could tell where the line was because there were no trees. Although, of course, they grew back. But for a number of years, you could tell by that where the lines were. Looking at this one, this is Township 12 North, 4 West. I drew the blue line, but the portion above it is in western part of Cloverdale, Putnam County, then part below it's in Owen County. And you see the 10 o'clock line, all the notes that went into that. I'll zoom in a little bit. You can see a little bit of some of the things, the notations I had. Pause if you'd like to read it. And then survey by John MacDonald, 1815, and John Collette, 1819. And then this is some of their field notes. In this one, you can see some of the interesting things that they noted. And then also said that the part of the township lying in Harrison's Purchase was surveyed by John MacDonald, district surveyor. Did not have a date. I'll show you later in another one though where they did date it. And then the part north of Harrison's Purchase, or above the 10 o'clock line, was John Collette, September 30th, 1819. So that helps clarify a few things, and we're going to see some more that helps even more with that. This is a map of Putnam County showing where the 10 o'clock line is. Basically, a little bit of Cloverdale Township, Orton Township. Pause if you'd like to see it. This is a better one. This is Township 13 North, 5 West, part of Washington Township. This clarifies a little bit more. And also you see, they note some of the trees. Beech, oak, poplar, so forth and so on. It's very neat. And then surveyed 1815 by John McDonald, 1819 by John Class. So very clarifies that McDonald surveyed his part, or below the line, in 1815, although I think the line itself was run in 1812 by the other two men we noted on that map earlier. And this is just a close-up of one of the page of field notes. Okay, so we've acquired the land. Now the natives are gone, so to speak, for the most part. The ones that are still here are not going to be a problem. We've surveyed it. So now we need a way to govern ourselves. So this is the actual handwritten act of the state legislature of General Assembly that created Putnam County, still on file in the county clerk's office in the courthouse. Extremely valuable handwritten act. I'm going to show you part, but not all of it. Titled An Act for the Creation of a New County out of Owen and Vigo counties and north of Owen. Section 1 says an act by the General Assembly that after the first Monday of April next, first I need to explain this first Monday of April next, what that means. Some people have misinterpreted that. We have some errors in our histories only because people don't understand what that means. That does not mean the next year necessarily, although in this case it does happen to be. It's the next time that falls on the calendar. Okay, and we're going to show you an example of why we had some problems because of that. So the first Monday of April next, designate a new county named Putnam. They did not say who or what it was named after. And they appointed 5 men, 5 specific men, who are to fix the seat of justice, or the county seat of the county. And they are to convene at the home of James Athey. James Athey built the first cabin, or first permanent structure, in the winter of 1818 and 1819 in Washington Township. I'll show you that in a second. And they're to convene the first Monday of May next. The first Monday of May next is May 6, 1822. That's when they're going to convene and then try to start looking for a seat of justice for Putnam County. Also in this act, they talk about the circuit court, which is supposed to start meeting at the home of James Athey until suitable accommodations can be had at the seat of justice whenever it gets selected. Pause if you'd like to read more. Signed December 31st, 1821 by Governor Jonathan Jennings, the Speaker of the House, and the President of the Senate. Very interesting to read this. This marker indicates where the home of James Athey stood. Some of you know about it, but if you don't, it's in Washington Township, not quite a mile south of the Huffman Cover Bridge. If you can find the Huffman Cover Bridge, it's not easy to find if you're not familiar with it. Go south and you see the traffic on I-70 right here. So just south of the I-70, you see this. Now this is an old photo. We've restored this and it looks like this now. It actually looks better than this even now. 700 feet back, first cabin Putnam County built by James Athey, 1819. First court held till September of 1822, not 23. I'll show you why. Miami Indian settlement and burying ground back at this place, marked by the Daughters of the American Revolution, 1936. We'll look at some of these things. Now, when those 5 men were trying to find the seat of justice, it said they looked at several different places, but they never could agree on anything. And apparently they didn't try very hard. But this was the original boundary of Putnam County right here. It's not where it is now. So we're way down here in Clay County, just a little bit of Borton, Warren, and so forth, not much. Park, and was part of the Owen. So the central part of Putnam County at that time would have been close to Athey's Cabin. There's Greencastle, which didn't even exist in 1822 in any way, shape, or form, is barely in it. And it didn't exist at all. There's nothing. There's still a wilderness. This actually came from the land patent book. We had a group of people that took a lot of trouble to find out what the land patents were applied for. Land patents being the first deed of land for the United States government to the first settler. The 5 men that were tasked to finding the seat of justice in Putnam County failed to perform the duty assigned them. The General Assembly was not happy, appointed 5 new men, 5 different men, we're not going to mess around this time, to meet at the home of John Butcher. John Butcher, by this time, had had a land patent and built his cabin north and a little bit west of Greencastle on the hills above Big Walnut. On the 2nd Monday of April next, signed January 7th, 1823. The 2nd Monday of April next is not 1824. It's the next time it falls in the calendar. So since this is January, the next time it falls on the calendar is April 14th, 1823. So these 5 men did meet, and they did select the seat of justice, the recently platted Greencastle, which had just been platted by Ephraim Dukes, who deeded this land, and then also his son-in-law, John Wesley Clark, some of the land, to the first land agent of Putnam County named Amos Robertson, with the condition that it be named the seat of justice. Amos Robertson wasted no time in advertising for the sale of lots in the recently platted town of Greencastle being the seat of justice of Putnam County, describes it a little bit. And what's interesting, by law, Amos Robertson retained 10% of the sale of lots, partly for his compensation, but partly for his expenses. You see that he ran this 8 weeks in quite a few newspapers, so he's out a little bit of money. Pause if you'd like to read this. It's very interesting. Moving on, this is the second sale of lots by the land agent, John Baird. And this is 1824, second sale of lots, and he's describing Putnam County and Greencastle a little bit, saying that we now have a grist mill and a sawmill, which was north of town, along Big Walnut, near the waterworks, near the fairgrounds. Described it as being only 3 years ago, it was a wilderness. It was an entire wilderness just 3 years ago. And now, perhaps more than 400 families live in Greencastle, which is perhaps quite an exaggeration. Nowhere near that many, but that's okay. You got to sell the lots, right? Note it's being part of the new purchase and so forth. I'm going to pause if you'd like to read it. Move on. And this is the land patent for part of what became Greencastle. There were actually a few. This is the part that Ephraim Dukes of Monroe County, Indiana, applied for in January of 1821. The patent was granted in February of 1822. It took about a year to do the paperwork, get it processed and signed. And it's been said that Dukes came from Greencastle, Pennsylvania, and named Greencastle, Indiana, after that place, and that is absolutely not true. We're going to discuss that separately. When we talk about the founding of Greencastle, you want to make sure you tune in for that one. So we described that, and while it didn't happen, we see that he came from Monroe County, Indiana, and then we trace his whereabouts at different times and so forth. Dukes was a land speculator. He's in Kentucky, then he was in Ohio, he was here, and then a few years, not very long after this, 1836, He had sold his Greencastle holdings and moved to LaPorte, Indiana, where he helped develop that place where he died. Having never lived in Greencastle, Pennsylvania. Greencastle, Pennsylvania is a real place, by the way. It's about 30 miles west of a sleepy little crossroads called Gettysburg. You may have heard of it. Proceeding on with some of the early acts of the courts, Jonathan Jennings orders the sheriff of Putnam County to round up the qualified voters the first Monday of April next, and we're going to have an election. We're going to elect 2 appellate judges, a clerk, and 3 commissioners. And that first Monday of April next, he signed it January 1st, 1822. So that was held April 1st, 1822, not 1823. The next time it fell on the calendar, April 1st, 1822, Jacob Call had been appointed by Jennings to be a presiding judge, and in this election we elected George Kirkpatrick and Purnell Chance as associate judges. Arthur McGoy was elected the clerk, and William McIntosh became the sheriff. This may be the first court proceeding. We believe it is. So I've underlined parts of it. This blue is mine, of course. Is instructing the sheriff of Vigo County to round up these 5 men, Clapp, Rogers, and then these others in Coleman, take them to the home of James Athey the first Monday of September next, where they will bear witness, give evidence on behalf of John Hamilton, who is suing John Collette for droving of hogs, which is he's claiming he stole his hogs, apparently. Vineyard from Park County. You see that it's signed by Arthur McGoy. July 24th, 1822. So the first Monday of September next was the next time it fell on the calendar, which is not the next year. It was September 2nd, 1822, and we'll see where we're going to affirm that here in just a second. This is the part of the proceedings of that, because we can't read it like this, so I chopped it up into 3 pieces so we could read it. The first 2 saying that State of Indiana, Putnam Circuit Court, September term, 1822, clearly 1822. John Hamilton, John Collette, case for $600, or maybe $6, I'm guessing. $600 is way too much money for a few hogs. The same 5 men that were named, or 6 men, I apologize, that were named in that other order. Then bottom of that, the deputy that served and got these men there wants compensated for serving and then bring them there. And apparently they're a rowdy bunch because he needs 10 cents to retain them. Now the proceedings are almost totally illegible. I'd like to use the primary source documents when I can, but I'm going to have to jump to Weeks 1910 history, where he described this and listed the jury members. He said the name of the 12th is not even legible, and it's not legible at all now. And also he noted, before court was adjourned, following allowance was made, James Athey received $12 for use of his home for 12 days for the court purposes. Cunningham, 2, to house the grand jury for 2 days. And then he also received $2 to serve as bailiff. And then this Goodrich received $1 for being a bailiff. And then the last day of June 1823, the first session of the court ended, and they ordered that it's to be adjourned and then meet next in the home of Isaiah Wright. Very clearly, the first term was September of 1822 to June of 1823. Weeks also continued to say a brief period of time till spring of 1825. The court record is incomplete, and it is. It's hard to really follow what's going on, but he correctly notes that between September of 1823 and summer of 1824, the second session of the court did meet at the home of Isaiah Wright. His log cabin was near Athey's. Continuing, pause if you like to read it. And then Weeks also says the county seat question being settled. The justice, the courts, moved to Greencastle, but we don't yet have a courthouse. So the sessions were held at different homes for a period of time, beginning the fall of 1824 at the house of Jubilee DeWeese. There's a log cabin on the west side of the square where Blake's Opera House was in 1910. Then in May of 1826, the records, again, were hard to follow. It appears to be at the home of Justice Orr. And then a courthouse was built because there's no more record of proceedings in private buildings. This was the first courthouse, we believe. Painting by Elisha Cowgill, noted Greencastle painter, hanging at the Putnam County Museum, if you'd like to see it. Very nice painting. Two-story building, fairly simple, very small. But I want to note this building behind it. I believe this is in the courthouse square on the north end in the middle, and this building is beside it to the east, and it's going to be important of what the importance of this building as we go. Back to Weeks, saying, meanwhile, the courthouse committee on September 1829 term reported that the new courthouse is complete, except for a few incidentals, and ordered that Amos Robertson be allowed $354.44. I believe Amos Robertson acted as a land agent, handed that money to whoever built the building. I don't think Amos Robertson built it, although he might have. I think as land agent, he was the one handling the money, making the payment to the actual builder, but he could have been the builder. And then also Weeks continues to say that we outgrew it immediately, and then within 2 years found necessary to erect a separate building for the clerk and recorder. Noted in the May term of 1833, the records show that the clerk's office will be built 10 feet west of Indiana and 10 feet north Washington Street, facing west, facing the courthouse. Built on the east side of the courthouse, facing the courthouse. And then also noted that basically it ended up being a two-room building, one-story, two-room building. And the clerk's office, recorder's office, would be maintained separately. And then also Weeks is noting the confusion of the records, and they note that it could determine whether references are made to the courthouse was built 1827, 1828, or another one. But I think we're going to clarify that. Just looking at the 1879 Atlas of Putnam County and the history, notes the things that we've already talked about, although they did note they think Amos Robertson built it. I don't think he did. He might have. Under the supervision of Arthur McGoy, clerk and recorder. This building remained in use in 1832 when a single-story brick house was erected in its stead, which continued until the erection of the present edifice in 1879. No, that's not what happened. I think I will be able to clarify this. I need to show you this building first. This is also a painting of Elijah Cowgill. The Putnam County Seminary was built 1839, and I think the records show that is in fact the case. The seminaries, when we first started getting schools, there was provision made that you could have a county seminary of learning. I talk about the seminaries and education in a separate presentation, which I think you'd be interested in. But I'll tell you why this is important in relation to courthouse. This is a wonderful page from the history of DePaul University. Left, it was the town seminary located on West Washington Street. And this was DePaul's edifice, which burnt to the ground, we believe, where the West Library is now. And then this was the county seminary, which looks exactly like the painting we were just looking at. Pause if you'd like to read this. The county seminary is southeast corner of seminary and college. This is the first instance where they actually clarified where it actually was, because every other reference is the corner of college and seminary. Look at the map, just to show you that again. If you want to follow early education, I'll describe this quite a bit more. This is where the town seminary was. We're not a city yet. Greencastle's not a city yet. 2 blocks west of Courthouse. The entire block, all 4 lots, for the town seminary. And then the county seminary, according to that history, was right here where there was a city school. This derived from 1864 map, courtesy of Library of Congress. It's online if you'd like to see it. Pause if you'd like to read some of these things. Move on here. And then go back to this again. Highlight this second. In 1832, a single hip roof brick house was erected. That part's correct. Only not 1832, probably a few years later than that. It would make no sense for a courthouse to be built except in 1829 and just a few years later torn down for a new courthouse. That did not happen. And unless there was some sort of physical damage. I examined all the newspapers online available of the Hoosier State Chronicles, which is a very wonderful source. It would have been noted in the newspapers had there been some sort of tragedy of the building, and there was not. The second building that they're talking about was actually that building that we saw to the east of the building, which is the office of the clerk and recorder. This is, I believe, I'm quite certain, the second courthouse. This is also Elijah Cowgill painting, built from 1846 to 1848, actually. Let's examine the records of the commissioners. December 9th, 1846, they sold the original building, which I'm certain is the 1827 building, to William Collier for $150. He was ordered to remove it and get it off the ground by June 1st, 1847. So a new courthouse be constructed. Also on that same date, December 9th, 1846, a contract was signed for the new courthouse with Elisha Adamson going to be the builder, going to cost $8,500, and then incidentals were later added for $225. Construction was finished in 1848. So during the time this was constructed, since the old courthouse was physically removed, there's no courthouse there at all. Some of the proceedings probably were of the court probably were held at the county seminary, which looks a lot like a courthouse. I think that's where some of the confusion came in with some people, is because the proceedings were held there. But I'm quite certain that this is the second courthouse. Here's another painting of the same building from a different view. Elijah Cowgill looks like looking north. I want you to note a few things. It's got 3 chimneys. Notice the shutters and everything. The trees, which are bare, so it's a wintertime picture. I don't know why the grass is green, because it wouldn't have been. And then this awning here. Everything but the people came from this photo. Very, very nice photo. It's a very large photo. It's an actual photo. It's framed and in the office, or I saw it in the office of the county health department. You can see the awning and all those trees, but no people, even the shutters, the 3 chimneys, and then this is wintertime. You see smoke coming out of the middle one. It's a very interesting photo. Then, of course, this is the current courthouse. The cornerstone was laid October 1903 in the northeast corner. You can still see it. Plaque on the first floor said it cost $150,000 plus, and then some incidentals. It was dedicated in 1905. In the north entrance, it's kind of interesting. You can see that the tile inlay says 1904. I thought that's kind of interesting. Beautiful building. It's going to be in use for many, many years. Let's talk about something else we can't continue. Let's talk about this. It's too interesting not to. Weeks 1910 talked about the first marriage with Thomas Jackson and Sarah Wood. License was issued July 4th, 1822. We did not even yet have a seat of justice in 1822. The ceremony was delayed till later in the month. Noted that Reuben Clearwaters did the honors. Reuben Clearwaters married a lot of people in the early years of Putnam County. Jackson said he had a good deal of getting his license. County clerk had no office. We had no office. Courts are being held at the home of James VIII. As a matter of fact, in July of 1822, we didn't even have the first term. The first term of the court started September of 1822. So I had a good deal of trouble tracking down the county clerk who had no office, no headquarters. I had to run around the county in search of him. A point of reference, Thomas Jackson, according to his land patent, had acquired Section 11, land in Section 11, Greencastle Township, a couple of miles northeast of Greencastle. McGoy, he had acquired some land in Section 35 of Madison Township, which is the area that's now we commonly refer to as Ocala. Clearwaters, the minister, lived in Section 9 of Warren Township, which is near what's now Putnamville, just point of reference. So they did have to search all over trying to find him. When he did, found his office as well, for it was in his hat. Inside the lining, he produced a paper and made out the license. He got Reuben Clearwaters Emeritus, went to housekeeping. About 2 weeks later, Clearwaters came. Where I was making this punch ons is actually wooden floor. He was splitting logs for his floor of his cabinet, is what that means. I said that he had made a mistake and have to marry us again. I was very well satisfied with my wife. Without asking what the matter was, I willingly consented and then went back to the cabin, got my wife, repeated ceremony, went back to work. And it's a good thing that he was satisfied with his wife, because that could have had not quite so happy an ending. I thought this was kind of interesting story. Also, in this one in Weeks, 1910, all the money brought to the county was handled by the county clerk, Arthur McGoy. Related that he kept the money in his wife's blue stocking under the bed, saying that it was more secure than any vault in America. Now, he explained this. Arthur McGoy ran the whole show. He was a clerk, he was a recorder, he was a treasurer, he was everything. There was no other office. The General Assembly didn't provide for a treasurer until 1828, a recorder in 1836, and then when the Constitution was rewritten for the state in 1851, they provided for the office of a county auditor. County auditor, basically, one of the duties, the main duty, is keeping the records of the county. So they created some separation of duties, so to speak, where the treasurer handles the money and the auditor keeps the books. But Arthur McGoy did it all. He's the one that handled the money. Oh, that's kind of interesting. Let's talk about how the county was named. This is a 1907 article by this Samuel Putnam of New Salem, Massachusetts. That should sound familiar to you. In the early days, there were some interesting goings on at New Salem, Massachusetts. If you go to Salem, Massachusetts, you go in the wrong place. The court proceedings were in Salem, but everything happened, including some young ladies from the Putnam family, at New Salem, which is now Danvers, Massachusetts, saying that this man is a kin of General Israel Putnam, who directed the Continental troops at the Battle of Breed's Hill, and General Rufus Putnam, chief engineer of the Revolutionary Continental Army. This gentleman celebrating his 100th birthday. Rufus Putnam and Israel Putnam were first cousins. I believe there's 8 years age difference, Israel being the older, but they're first cousins. And Rufus not only was chief engineer during the Revolutionary War, he was appointed in 1796 the first Surveyor General of the United States, a position he held until 1803, when he helped found the state of Ohio. Continuing to talk about it a little bit more. This is just too interesting that not sure. This is an old article talking about Putnam Rock. It's talking about at West Point, as chief engineer of the Revolutionary Army, Rufus Putnam was the one that designed the fortifications. So up the Hudson River from New York City, at a bend on the west point of a bend, he designed Fort Clinton, Fort Putnam, and a few other smaller installations that collectively came to be known as West Point. Originally a fort during the war, an active fort, and then in 1803 became United States Military Academy. Talking about the common amusements for the officers when off duty. to go across the Hudson River, and there was a cliff toward the head or a plateau with some large rocks and boulders. And practicing their engineering skills, they would dislodge these large rocks and boulders and send them down to the Hudson River for amusement and also to practice their engineering skills again. I'm going to continue on. Colonel Rufus Putnam later became a general. At this time, he was still a colonel, but he became a general later in the war. Proposed going up this one very large rock, believed that it was movable, and once moved, it would roll over and fall 20 to 50 feet into the river. Pause if you'd like to read it. Moving on. Basically, he took some officers and men with axes, and with the axes, they cut some trees and tree limbs, used as levers and ropes, and at the word Congress, they pulled the ropes and used the levers and dislodged this very large boulder when crashing down the river, smashing mature trees, and went down into the riverbed and hit the Hudson River with such a roar, neighbors miles away thought they heard thunder in the middle of a sunny day. Pause if you'd like to read more. Moving on. On arriving to the river, the party embarked, landed, and a number of 60 or 70 on the rock. And if they mean 60 or 70 one time, that was in fact a very large rock, much bigger than my house. Colonel Putnam broke open a bottle of whiskey, passed it around, and named it Putnam's Rock. I'm sure alcohol was involved in this entire endeavor, but I think it's very interesting. Pause if you'd like to read more. This is an interesting thing. On this date in history, September 27th, 1792, General Rufus Putnam concluded a treaty of peace and friendship with the Indians, or the natives, at Post Vincennes, which is what it was called at that time. Now, nobody gave any land, 1792. It's just a treaty of friendship. But it's very significant that Rufus Putnam, who was a general at that time, led that delegation. Pause if you'd like to read more. Moving on. And this 1888 newspaper talks about a great day, settlement of the Northwest, new purchase, if you will, the Northwest Territory, what's now called the Midwest. In 1787, after a midnight conference in Massachusetts, Rufus Putnam and Benjamin Tupper, generals of the American Army, issued a call to citizens. Basically, they're going to go and explore the new purchase, is what they're going to do. This entire expedition was very well documented in a book called The Pioneers by David McCallum. Very wonderful book. It talks about their adventures and what they did, led by Rufus Putnam and Benjamin Tupper. Rufus Putnam, then, said to be the first white man who settled in Ohio, Marietta. He lived to 1824, so just a few years before his death. He said that he's at advanced age now, noted as being the father of Ohio. He led delegation to Washington County, Ohio, to the State of Ohio Constitutional Convention in 1803 when Ohio became a state. And he was the father of Ohio. He's a very significant person. And I'm not sure why we have not heard more of this Rufus Putnam. He was in the newspaper a lot, dozens of newspaper articles about the time Putnam County was named and formed. Unlike his older cousin Israel, who went back to Massachusetts after the Revolutionary War, quietly lived his life out, having never set foot in the Midwest. So I think we could say with a great deal of confidence that Putnam County was almost certainly named after Rufus Putnam, not Israel Putnam. The boundary changed a number of times. If you want to pause and read this, and you understand legal descriptions, this was the boundaries in the original act that we were looking at earlier. Moving on, pause if you'd like to read it. But again, we're looking at what we looked at earlier. This is the original boundary of Putnam County. Very little bit of the current Putnam County was in the original boundary. December 31st, 1822, the boundaries changed again based on legal description. I drew this. So this is what it was like in 1822, and this is what it was like in 1823 when Greencastle was selected as the seat of justice. As you can see, it's more toward the center part of the county at that time, which changed again January 31st, 1824. It's hard to see yellow line. And finally, in 1838, after all these changes, this is finally what was agreed upon, other than the fact that Mill Creek Township is not part of Putnam in 1838. Fast forward about 20 years. Again, these newspaper articles, you can go to the Hoosier State Chronicles and read them if you like. Very wonderful resource. County Commissioner's Court, portion of citizens of Morgan living west of Mill Creek again presented petition, apparently they've done it before, to have their territory annexed into Putnam, but for some cause or other, the petition was not granted. John Hanna represented the petitioners, and Addison Daggy was the opposing side. So Mill Creek Township was part of Morgan, not Hendricks like you think. So the residents of Mill Creek had to go all the way down to Martinsville, almost 30 miles away, get across Mill Creek, get across the White River. Is quite a journey to get to Martinsville for their county seat at Morgan County, whereas Greencastle is only maybe 10 or 12 miles away. So they wanted to be annexed into Putnam. We see in 1860, Judge Cowgill has decided recent session, that the petition of the citizens of Morgan praying to be part and parcel of Old Putnam should be granted. Therefore, all that portion of Morgan lying north of Mill Creek and west is for all legal purposes considered a portion of Putnam. If you want to pause to read the rest of it, it's kind of interesting. We'll move on. Morgan County apparently was not happy. They appealed it, went all the way to State Supreme Court. State Supreme Court sided with Morgan and said that Mill Creek therefore refers back to Morgan County as no longer a part and parcel of Old Putnam, saying the county commissioners of Putnam County acted illegally in annexing Mill Creek Township. Pause if you'd like to read it. Moving on. Apologize, this is so hard to read. This is 1861, not long after that, where the General Assembly settled the matter once and for all, saying Mill Creek is part of Putnam County beyond dispute, and that settled that matter. So that's how Mill Creek became part of Putnam. Pause if you'd like to read it. Move on. About the time this was happening, Putnam County almost lost a very large chunk of territory in the northwest part of the county. The 1879 Atlas, the plat of Russellville. This is the north end of town, not along the road, but or where the road used to be, but farther north. So the cemetery is up here. So as your reference point, the old school is right about here. This is way up north end of town, and you see that they designated a public square. And the reason, there's a specific reason, in 1836 when Russellville was platted, they had a public square. So the citizens of that part of Putnam and then adjoining Montgomery and Park felt they were too isolated and too far away from their county seats and decided they want to create a new county. And they tried for many years to do so. See, in 1845, Jacob During, leading citizen of Russellville, tried to influence a state senator Orth of Lafayette. And if you want to read the proceedings, what happened, you can pause and read the whole thing, but he was not successful. But just the point is that they were trying this all the way back in 1845 to try to get the legislature to create this new county. In 1859, when Joseph Fordyce was representing Putnam County in the state legislature, a citizen of Russellville, he was able to get legislation passed to, in fact, create a new county. called Bourbon. I don't know if Bourbon, if they named it after, or they're going to name it after Bourbon County, Kentucky, or that was somebody's beverage of choice, but that was the name, with Russellville as the county seat. That's why they had set off that public square. And it's a done deal. It's passed. The governor signed it, and it's done. They're going to do it. The legislature instructed the 3 counties to send 1 representative to sit down just to work out the details. Again, it's done. It's a done deal. All they have to do is work out the details. When they sat down, Mr. Cain, C-A-I-N, I never did find his first name, of Park County, said, no, we've changed our mind. We're giving up too much land, and we want to have nothing to do with this. So that did not happen. However, it did not end. When Reuben Reagan was representing Putnam County in 1861, he tried to introduce various amendments to House Bill 39 of that session. House Bill 39 of that session was primarily to create Newton County in northern Indiana. And you can see that he has various proceedings where he tried to amend into that, forming the new county of Bourbon, which was tabled. He tried this a number of times, and it was tabled every single time, and it basically died. And that was the end of the efforts to try to create a new county of Bourbon. We were that close, that close. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed learning some of the early history of Putnam County. Come back, talk about a lot of the tiny towns and vantage villages and other presentations, also the first Putnam County Hospital, early education efforts, and other things. And thank you.